At the Civil Bureau, I stood there clutching the number slip in my hand, the one we had waited hours for, the one that was supposed to bind our futures. But he stole it. Yes, the man I trusted, the man who whispered promises every night, stole our number to marry another girl right before my eyes. And when I demanded an explanation, he smirked and said, "Relax, I was just acting." Just acting. My entire world collapsed while he called it a game. But what happened after, no one expected. Not even him. The morning had started with laughter, the kind of laughter that comes when two people are nervous but excited. Ion and I had woken before dawn, dressed carefully, and taken a taxi to the Civil Bureau. The city still yawned itself awake as we rode through streets lined with sleepy tea stalls and the distant honks of buses. My hands clutched the file of documents, every page checked twice, then thrice, because today was supposed to be perfect. He had held my hand the entire ride, thumb stroking the back of my fingers as he whispered, "This is it, love. Just a few hours and we'll finally be official." The bureau was a mess of people when we arrived, couples crowded into the small hall with plastic chairs and fluorescent lights that buzzed overhead. Some looked shy, avoiding each other's eyes, some were too eager, hugging like the papers in their hands were only formalities. I felt my heart thrum in my chest, equal parts nerves and joy. Ion squeezed my shoulder as we took our seats. "Don't worry, everything's going to be fine. We've waited 3 years for this. Nothing can go wrong now. Nothing can go wrong." I believed him. Our number was 146. I remember staring at it, memorizing it, whispering it under my breath like it was sacred. Every time the electronic board dinged and changed, I checked the slip again, reassured by its presence in my hand. Ion leaned close, his warm breath brushing my ear as he joked about how he'd probably faint when they asked him to sign the papers. I laughed, punching his arm lightly. Everything felt so alive, so real. I thought in a few minutes, I'd walk out of here as his wife. But then she walked in. She was striking, the kind of presence that silenced a room even if no one admitted it. Tall, poised, her black hair falling sleek against a sharp jawline, lips painted crimson red. She didn't look around like the rest of us had. She walked straight through the crowded hall with a confidence that made her heels echo louder than they should have. And her eyes went directly to Ion. My laughter died in my throat as I felt him stiffen beside me. He glanced up, and in that instant, the warmth in his hand cooled. He stood without warning, leaving me clutching the number slip alone on the chair. "Ion," I called after him, confusion biting through me. But he didn't answer. The girl leaned in close to him, whispering something I couldn't catch. His jaw clenched, his gaze flicked toward me for only a heartbeat, and then he did something I'll never forget. He reached for the slip in my hand, the slip that carried our future, and yanked it from my grasp with a swiftness that left me stunned. Before I could even process, the announcement rang out. "Number 146, please step forward." That was our number, our turn, the culmination of years of love, promises, and sacrifice. My pulse hammered in my ears as I watched him walk with her, not me, toward the counter. She handed over her documents, and there he was, standing beside her, signing papers, smiling faintly. Smiling the way he once did at me. I felt my stomach drop, the ground beneath me dissolve. People around whispered, some stealing glances in pity, others pretending not to notice. The lights above seemed too bright, the air too thin. I pushed through the crowd, my voice sharp and trembling. "Ion, what is this? That's our number. This is our life." He looked at me, and for a fleeting second, I thought I'd see guilt. I thought maybe he'd stammer an explanation, maybe admit a mistake. But what I saw instead was something colder than betrayal, a smirk. That same smirk I had once adored when he teased me, when he surprised me with flowers, when he stole kisses under the streetlights. But now it cut through me like glass. "Relax, I was just acting," he said, his tone casual, almost mocking. Just acting. As though ripping out the heart of someone who trusted you was a game, as though love was nothing but a rehearsal, and I was the fool who thought it was real. The walls of the bureau seemed to close in, my chest tightening until breathing hurt. Around us, the murmur of people faded into silence, their faces blurring at the edges of my vision. My knees shook, but I refused to fall. He wanted a scene. He wanted me to crumble, to scream, to make his betrayal dramatic. But I couldn't give him that. My lips trembled, but I bit down hard, forcing the tears back where they burned like acid. My voice, when it came, was quiet but steady. You were never acting, Ion. You were just never real. And with that, I turned and walked out of the bureau, the slipless hand that once held our future now empty but strangely free. Each step away from him felt heavy, like dragging chains, but deep inside, I knew those chains were breaking. Outside, the city roared on, indifferent to my shattered world. Cars honked, vendors shouted, life continued as though nothing had collapsed. I stood on the pavement, my chest rising and falling with sharp breaths, and realized something terrifying yet liberating. The man I loved never truly existed. He had always been a mask, and masks don't deserve tears. I tucked my hands into my pockets, steadied myself, and walked into the unknown. Alone, yes. Hurt, yes. But alive. And somewhere, deep in the cracks of my broken heart, a small spark whispered that this wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of something I hadn't yet imagined. They say betrayal doesn't kill you, but it makes you wish it had. At the Civil Bureau, he stole our number to wed another girl and called it, just acting. But what he didn't know was that his betrayal would become the brushstroke that painted my freedom, the fire that reshaped my life. This is what happened after I walked out that day. The days following that humiliation were the hardest I had ever endured. The image of him signing papers with another woman replayed endlessly in my head, like a cruel film stuck on repeat. I couldn't sleep without waking in tears. The silence of my small apartment turned hostile, every corner filled with echoes of him, his laughter, his promises, his lies. The bed felt too big, the mornings too long, and my own reflection in the mirror looked like a stranger. Friends called, urging me to come out, to forget him, to move on, but those two words felt like a mountain I couldn't climb. Moving on wasn't simple when your entire future had been snatched in one merciless act. But pain has a strange way of forcing you to remember who you were before someone else's shadow covered your light. One night, unable to sleep, I pulled out an old box from under my bed. Inside were brushes, half-dried paint tubes, and a dusty sketchbook filled with unfinished drawings. Before Ion, art had been my dream. I wanted to open a small studio, a place where people could come and feel alive through colors. But with him, I had tucked that dream away, telling myself love was enough. That night, with tears still wet on my cheeks, I placed a blank canvas on the easel and picked up a brush. At first, the strokes were angry, harsh, jagged lines that tore across the canvas. But as the hours passed, the colors softened, forming shapes I didn't intend yet recognized instantly. A faceless man holding two masks, one smiling, one crying. My chest ached as I stepped back. Without meaning to, I had painted my story. His deception, my pain, the truth that love had been a performance. I didn't plan to show it to anyone, but something inside me urged me to post it online. The next morning, I woke to dozens of messages. Strangers wrote, "This is my story too," and, "Your painting speaks the words I could never say." The realization hit me like sunlight through cracks in a wall, I wasn't alone. My heartbreak wasn't unique, but my way of telling it could help others heal too. That became my reason to wake up each day. I painted relentlessly. Nights blurred into mornings, tears mixed with paint, and slowly the ache in my chest transformed into something powerful. Each painting carried a piece of my grief, my questions, my recovery. I created a series called Unmasked, where I explored betrayal, hope, and rebirth. People connected with it. They saw themselves in the strokes, in the faceless figures, in the broken hearts mended with gold. Opportunities followed. Small exhibitions turned into bigger ones. Blogs wrote about my work. Galleries invited me to showcase. For the first time in years, I didn't introduce myself as someone's girlfriend, someone's almost wife. I introduced myself as an artist. The little girl inside me, the one who had once dreamed of opening a studio, smiled again. But healing isn't a straight path. There were nights when memories still clawed at me, when I wanted to scream his name and demand answers I'd never get. On those nights, I would go back to the first painting, the faceless man with two masks. I'd stare at it until the anger dissolved, replaced by a quiet truth. Some people come into your life only to show you what love isn't. Months later, during my biggest exhibition yet, I stood in a gallery hall filled with strangers admiring my work. The walls that once echoed with my sobs now echoed with whispers of awe. People took photos, asked questions, and connected with me in ways deeper than small talk. My heart swelled, not with pride, but with gratitude. I had turned ashes into art. And then, like a shadow from the past, I saw him. Ion. He looked nothing like the man I remembered. His once confident shoulders sagged, his eyes were hollow, his smile nowhere to be found. I had heard through friends that the girl he married had left him within months. Rumors said she had drained him, abandoned him, and left him chasing ghosts. Now, here he was, standing among strangers, staring at the paintings born from the wreckage of what he had done. Our eyes met across the room. For a moment, time folded, and I was back in that civil bureau, clutching the slip he had stolen. My heart pounded, but not from love or longing, only from the sudden realization of how far I had come. He walked toward me, each step uncertain. When he finally stood in front of me, his voice was barely more than a whisper. "Can we talk?" The old me, the broken me, might have clung to that moment, desperate for closure or reconciliation. But I wasn't her anymore. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw nothing but a stranger who had once worn a mask I fell for. I smiled, not with bitterness, not with revenge, but with the calm strength I had fought to build. "No, Ion," I said gently. "That chapter is closed. Thank you for teaching me the value of truth by showing me lies." I turned and walked away, my heels clicking against the polished floor, my chest light. He didn't follow. He couldn't. He had no power over me anymore. That night, as I stood before the last painting of my series, I finally understood what love truly was. It wasn't the promises whispered at midnight. It wasn't the paper from the Civil Bureau. Love was keeping the promises you make to yourself. To dream, to heal, to rise. And as I looked around at the people moved by my art, I realized I hadn't just found freedom. I had found purpose. So when I speak to you now, remember this: sometimes the betrayal you think will break you is the very fire that will forge your strength. Don't waste your tears on masks. Save them for your dreams. At the Civil Bureau, he stole my number to marry another girl. He said it was just acting. But in that act, he lost me forever. And in losing me, I found myself. To anyone watching this, remember, the betrayal you think will break you might just be the fire that forges your strength. Don't waste your tears on masks. Save them for your dreams.